I rise today with a very urgent and critical situation for my home state and the presiding officer's home state, and for our Great Lakes in general. We are today just finding out that a commercial fisherman contracted by the government to do routine sampling of areas leading into the Great Lakes and Lake Michigan caught a 34-inch, 20-pound Asian carp in Lake Calumet, approximately 6 miles downstream from Lake Michigan, past the barriers on its way to Lake Michigan. This is the first Asian carp found past the electric barriers. It represents a very serious risk to the Great Lakes ecosystem and, frankly, to our way of life in the Great Lakes region. These fish are huge, and they are able to invade the Great Lakes. They could easily destroy our $7 billion fishing industry and our $16 billion recreational boating industry. Invasive species in the Great Lakes have already contributed to significant declines in fish populations. The Asian carp could completely unwind the food chain, with devastating effects for our existing fish populations. We heard in testimony before my subcommittee on energy, on water and power, that these fish, which can get up to 90 or 100 pounds, effectively have no stomach. They eat all of the time. They eat up everything in the food chain, leaving other fish to die throughout the Great Lakes. It's extremely, extremely serious. We have been working on this issue for a number of years with electric fencing, most recently poisoning part of the waters in the Chicago channels to be able to determine whether or not there are any of these Asian carp that have come up the Mississippi River and come up the Illinois River. At the time, they didn't find anything, but unfortunately, today, they did, well past the electric barriers and fences for the first time. And let me just share with you one story from a few years ago that reflects what happens if these huge fish get into our precious Great Lakes. In 2003, a woman named Mary Poplet from Peoria, Illinois, decided to enjoy some warm October weather with a little jet skiing on the Illinois River. As she cruised the waves, the sound of her ski's motor excited a 30-pound Asian carp swimming under the water, which then leapt up and crashed into her. Imagine being hit in the face by a bowling ball. That's how she referred to it. She was knocked unconscious. She broke her nose, fractured a vertebrae, and she would have drowned if other boaters in the area had not gotten to her in time. Imagine that. Imagine that happening over and over again in Lake Michigan, in Lake Superior, around our Great Lakes. I can't imagine it. I don't want to imagine it. Mary's not alone. Since Asian carp were introduced to control algae in catfish ponds down south in the 1970s, the carp have spread at a very rapid pace, causing injuries, destroying ecosystems, and threatening entire industries. Now that an Asian carp has been found so close to Lake Michigan, it better be a huge wake-up call that we have to act swiftly to contain this threat. Despite everyone's best efforts, we are finding this situation that is calling for very decisive action. I've introduced legislation to close the locks until we have a permanent solution. This has been introduced also in the House by my colleague Congressman Camp and others. And I would today urge in the strongest possible terms that the Army Corps close the locks between the rivers and Lake Michigan now, today, while they continue to determine the best way to permanently separate the Chicago area waterway system from the Great Lakes. We know we need additional monitoring and sampling sampling resources applied to the area. I appreciate that last December, when there was DNA, fish DNA that was found above the locks, that the administration worked with us very quickly to redirect resources to the Army Corps to do some immediate actions at that time. But now it's not just DNA from a dead fish. Now it's a live fish. It's beyond the electric barrier. It's on its way in open waters into our Great Lakes. And we have to act decisively and immediately to protect our waters while a long-term solution is found. So again, Mr. President, I would urge the Army Corps of Engineers, the other agencies involved, to take this finding very, very seriously, to act with tremendous urgency, as each of us feel who represent Great Lakes states, to prevent further encroachment by these Asian carps into our Great Lakes. This isn't just the economy, it's not just boating, it's not just fishing, it really is our way of life in the Great Lakes. And despite efforts that have gone on for years to stop the fish, it hasn't happened. And now we have to take very decisive action to close the locks immediately so that we can determine how best long-term to solve this problem. Thank you, Mr. President.